There's a pattern that has destroyed every major superpower in modern history. Not military defeat, not foreign invasion, not a revolutionary uprising, but economic implosion. A collapse that follows an identical seven-stage sequence every single time. And it happens the exact same way every single time. Spain in the late 1500s, the first global empire on which the sun never set, collapsed when its finances imploded. Britain, the dominant world power from Napoleon to World War I, lost its empire in a generation after its economy buckled. The Soviet Union, a nuclear-armed superpower spanning 11 time zones, disintegrated in less than 3 years when its economic system failed. 3 times in the last 500 years, a dominant superpower has followed this exact same pattern. Military overextension, currency debasement, a national debt spiral, the loss of its industrial base, social decay, the loss of reserve currency status, and finally, a sudden and catastrophic collapse. And every time, the leadership believed they were the exception, that their system was unique, that the old rules of economics and history no longer applied to them. They were wrong every single time. And right now, the United States of America is following that exact same pattern, step by fatal step, warning sign by warning sign. The only question is whether we're nearing the middle of the sequence or the terrifying end. This is the story of how superpowers destroy themselves from within, following a predictable 7-stage path to ruin. How it happened to Spain, Britain, and the USSR, and why every single warning sign says the USA has already entered stage 5. Let's start with the first step in this predictable sequence: military overextension. A superpower, by definition, must project power globally. It must build and maintain a military capable of defending its interests and allies across the world. But there is a tipping point where global presence becomes global overstretch, where the costs of maintaining the empire begin to exceed the benefits it provides. The United States crossed that line decades ago. Today, America maintains over 750 military bases in more than 80 countries, a global footprint unmatched by any empire in history. The annual defense budget has ballooned to over $850 billion, a figure greater than the next 10 countries combined. We have made security commitments to nations across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, promises that we simply cannot fulfill if multiple crises erupt simultaneously. Like Spain garrisoning forts from the Philippines to Flanders, or Britain policing a quarter of the globe, the United States has stretched its military and financial resources to the breaking point. This isn't a sign of strength. It's a symptom of the same strategic hubris that marks the beginning of the end. An overextended military is a brittle military, and the enormous, relentless spending required to sustain it leads directly to the second, and arguably most critical, stage of collapse. Stage 2 is currency debasement. When a nation MS commitments outstrip its ability to pay for them with taxes and real economic growth, it turns to the last resort of a desperate government: the printing press. For Rome, it was clipping silver from their coins. For modern empires, it's called quantitative easing. The dynamic is identical. The United States officially severed the dollar's last link to gold in 1971, turning it into a pure fiat currency, its value backed by nothing more than government decree and public confidence. Since then, the floodgates have opened. The M2 money supply, a broad measure of the amount of currency in circulation, has skyrocketed by over 400% since the year 2000 alone. In the wake of the 2020 crisis, the Federal Reserve and the US government created more than $6 trillion new dollars out of thin air. The consequence is as predictable as the sunrise: the relentless erosion of purchasing power. The US dollar has lost over 98% of its value since the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. This is not an accident. It's a deliberate policy. Debasing the currency is a hidden tax, a way for the government to pay its bills by stealing the value of the savings of its own citizens. And this policy of rampant money printing inevitably fuels the next stage of the sequence. That third stage is the debt spiral. As the government prints money to fund its overextended military and domestic spending, it also borrows on an unprecedented scale, creating a national debt so large it becomes a black hole, consuming the nation's wealth. The United States national debt has surged past $36 trillion, a staggering figure that now exceeds 120% of the entire nation's annual economic output, or GDP. The numbers are so large they become meaningless, but the consequences are terrifyingly real. We are now spending over $1 trillion every single year just on interest payments for the debt we've already accumulated. Think about that. $1 trillion, producing nothing, building nothing, fixing nothing, simply servicing past obligations. We have reached the point of no return, where the government must borrow new money just to pay the interest on the money it previously borrowed. This is the definition of a debt spiral, a doom loop from which no empire has ever escaped. It is the financial equivalent of a terminal illness, and it works in tandem with the fourth stage, the hollowing out of the nation, productive core. Stage 4 is the loss of productive capacity. A healthy nation makes things. It builds, it innovates, it produces goods that the world wants to buy. A dying empire, funded by debt and printed money, does the opposite. It consumes more than it produces, and it papers over the difference with borrowing. For decades, the United States has systematically offshored its manufacturing base. The factories that once powered the American arsenal of democracy were gutted, shipped overseas in pursuit of cheap labor. The result is a chronic, massive trade deficit, now running at over $800 billion per year. We import far more than we export. We are no longer a workshop for the world. We are a shopping mall, dependent on foreign supply chains for nearly everything, from consumer electronics and pharmaceuticals to critical components for our own advanced military hardware. Like late-stage Spain, which became dependent on its colonies for resources while its domestic industry withered, the US has traded its productive independence for the short-term convenience of cheap foreign goods. This loss of industrial self-sufficiency makes a nation fragile, vulnerable, and ultimately poor. And it is this combination of financial rot and industrial decay that inevitably gives rise to the fifth and most visible stage of decline. Stage 5 is social decay, and it is the stage the United States is in right now. When the economic foundations of a society crumble, the social fabric tears apart. Trust, the glue that holds a civilization together, evaporates. Trust in institutions, the government, the media, the financial system, is at an all-time low. The signs of social breakdown are everywhere, and they are undeniable. Over 100,000 Americans are now dying from drug overdoses every single year, a figure that would have been unimaginable a generation ago. Homelessness is exploding in our wealthiest cities, creating scenes of medieval squalor on the streets of modern America. Our birth rates have cratered, falling well below the replacement level needed to sustain a population, a classic symptom of a society that has lost faith in its own future. Our political system is defined by total dysfunction, locked in a state of perpetual, unproductive conflict. This isn't just political disagreement. It is the breakdown of the basic social contract. When people no longer believe the system is fair, when the economy no longer offers a path to prosperity, when the culture no longer provides a sense of shared identity and purpose, society begins to disintegrate. This is precisely where America finds itself today, teetering on the brink of the final two stages of collapse. What comes next is what happened to every empire before us. Stage 6 is the loss of reserve currency status. The US dollar ES role as the world ES primary currency for international trade and finance is the ultimate source of American power. It allows us to run massive deficits and borrow cheaply because the world needs our currency. But that privilege is not a right, and it is now under direct threat. Nations are actively seeking alternatives. The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, now expanding to include major oil producers, is openly developing parallel payment systems to bypass the dollar. Central banks around the globe are diversifying their reserves, selling dollars and buying record amounts of gold. This process is already underway, and when it reaches a tipping point, it will trigger the seventh and final stage, a sudden, rapid collapse. This will not be a slow, gentle decline like Britain's over 50 years. It will be a fast, brutal implosion, much like the Soviet Union, which went from a feared global superpower to a historical footnote in just 900 days. Once confidence in the dollar breaks, the end will be swift. A currency crisis, hyperinflation, and a financial collapse will unleash social and political chaos on a scale we cannot imagine. The pattern is clear. The sequence is unbreakable. Spain, Britain, the USSR, they all walked this path. The United States is not different. It is not special. It is following the same 7 steps, and it has just hit stage 5. The final act is not a matter of if, but when.